The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to this webinar. Thank you for joining. My name is Neil Cook from Onshape, and today we're joined by a very special guest, Dennis Breen, who's the VP of Engineering at Capsonic Automotive and Aerospace. And today's webinar, Dennis will be talking about how Capsonic Automotive and Aerospace extends their CAD visibility across the entire enterprise. Now, this is a Q&A session. I will be talking to Dennis, and he will be explaining how his company uses Onshape Enterprise. But at the end, we will have a full Q&A session. Now, if you've got any questions during the presentation, please type them into the GoToWebinar questions panel, and we'll address them at the end. So please type those in, and we will prompt you again at the end to do that. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dennis. Dennis, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, good morning for here in Central Time. So I'm a VP of Engineering for Capsonic Automotive and Aerospace. So we are a manufacturer of automotive components and automotive switches and solenoids and harnesses, as well as aerospace, motors, rotors, and other electrical components in the aerospace industry.
Excellent. So can you tell us a little bit more about Capsonic and your roles and responsibilities?
Sure. So Capsonic, we have three main divisions, and then I'm responsible for the American Research and Engineering, the Technical Center here in Chicago area. And we provide the design services for the various different manufacturing divisions. We provide, like I said, products that go into commercial and military aircraft. Actually, some of the products, if you've ever had to use the bathroom on an aircraft, you've used one of our vacuum pumps. So we make the windings, the cores, we do the machining, a lot of various mechanical design and assembly products within the aerospace industry. And then we also do a lot of components for various vehicles, GM, Ford, Chrysler, Dodge, most of the American makes. All of the vehicles you see here, we make parts for these vehicles. They can be from switches to harnesses to multifunction switches, tilt and telescope switches for your seat, your steering wheel, cruise control, brake, shift, interlock, solenoids, all various products that we assemble in our manufacturing facility in Juarez, Mexico.
Nice. So you've been an Onshape customer for a while now. It's just a bit over 2 years. So there must have been some reasons why you decided to switch to Onshape. And can you describe to us some of the design challenges you were having with your old setup?
Sure. So we previously were an exclusive SolidWorks house, and one of our main challenges was our technical center here in Elgin, as well as we have manufacturing and product support engineering down in Juarez, Mexico, just over the border in El Paso, from El Paso. And we're a relatively small company, so a PDM, a full-blown PDM system wasn't in the cards for us in terms of the cost associated with that. So we had developed a system where we were basically transferring the master CAD files via what SolidWorks has, is they call a pack and go scenario, where you take the files, and we were posting them to a SharePoint website, and then the engineers in Juarez could pull that pack and go, open it up, work on the SolidWorks files. That was very problematic because once we exported that data out of our office here, we no longer were in charge of the master file, and we couldn't work on it until whatever work was being done down in Juarez was completed and those files sent back. It was also very problematic in the sense that if either office did not fully package all the right files, or wasn't keeping track of what they had, there was much confusion in terms of when they received it or what did they receive. Did they have the right information? It was very unclear. A couple of years ago, we were tasked with trying to find a better solution for that.
Okay. I mean, how did you discover Onshape?
So my president asked us to find a better way to do that because we were having so many issues with master files and who was in charge of the data. And we've been doing some cloud implementations in some other areas, and we've been developing some other online software. So I was looking around to see what the options were. And when I happened upon Onshape, and we decided to give it a trial run on a project a little over a year ago. And so we picked one of our development projects and we did it exclusively in Onshape to learn the process. And what we found that it was extremely convenient. Having the data reside in the cloud meant that my engineers in Juarez could see it literally at the same time as the engineers here in Elgin. And so that meant that they could collaborate in real time, which almost like a Google Docs scenario in terms of the CAD file. It just really changed the way that we think about the CAD in terms of working on it, who's working on it when. For me to have one engineer do drawings and another engineer do the 3D, that was no longer a serial process. It could actually be done in parallel because you could work off the same file literally at the same time. There were also a number of other benefits in terms of now I could let other people within the organization start to be able to see the data live as opposed to waiting for it to be 100% finished product coming out of engineering. So it's not throwing it over the wall. It's a little bit more collaborative in that sense.
Cool. So the whole pack and go and transferring files backwards and forwards, I guess it just created bottlenecks in the process. Have you got any kind of metrics about how much time or effort's been saved by using Onshape?
It's a good question. We didn't necessarily track that up front. I know that it has significantly improved my ability to push projects out, and also that everyone has the same knowledge. One of the downsides that we had before was like we would transfer the files down to manufacturing and we would continue working on it up here. And so then we would make changes or improvements, but they wouldn't necessarily have visibility to that until we sent the next version, if you will, down there. And so then that meant that any fixtures or automation that they were working on could be operating off of outdated information. And that's eliminated completely. On the flip side is now I can also see the automation equipment and look at it as it's being designed, as opposed to the previous scenario where the automation is done down in Juarez, for example. So they would be working on it down there and I wouldn't necessarily have visibility to it until I got down there to see it. And this changes that completely because I can log in and look at it here as they're developing it and make sure it's married correctly with the product design that we're working on up here.
Nice. So, do you still use SolidWorks, or do you use the system side by side?
We do. So we're in a transition phase where all of after the trial program. Let me back up a little bit. After the one trial program we went through where we got to basically a launch phase area and we felt like we were successful with that. There was a number of, certainly it was learning curve and learning how to use a new CAD system. Some people translate faster than others. Usually there's a relationship there with if they've used or worked with other CAD systems in the past, then it's a very easy transition. if they've never worked with only but one CAD system, changing to the second CAD system can sometimes be a little bit of a challenge. But mostly it's about understanding they all do similar functions, and so which icon does what function, and just learning that layout from the old system to the new system. So now we are using Onshape for all of our new product development, and we use SolidWorks to carry the legacy data as necessary. But we are finding that often the engineers, in order for me to push questions out on existing product out to vendors, or even to be able to do changes to show to customers, we're pushing that data up to Onshape faster than I thought we would. But we carry the SolidWorks licenses for our legacy data.
Yeah, that makes sense, and that's what most companies do. Move forward on new projects with Onshape, and then just keep their old CAD system for legacy. So, have you had to use Onshape support much during this transition period?
Well, yeah, there were many questions in the beginning about how to do things, and contacting them, creating the work tickets, and getting responses back has been really productive. We also did many of the online training, which we found to be quite beneficial, because it wasn't like a half-day scheduled off-site, lose a lot of productivity type training. A lot of the training could be done online based on when the engineers had free time or availability to do it according to their schedule, not according to some training schedule. So that's been really beneficial, and the response back on the tickets is usually very quick, within hours or less, and that has gotten us over a number of hurdles. And then we started to interact with Onshape more on functionality improvements and enhancements. And as we were going through that, we found that the enhancements, the turnaround time on those was quite impressive, in terms of sometimes it's in a few weeks or a month or two that functionality would be added, based on, I'm assuming not just simply our input, but others as well, and versus the normal process, which is yearly at best, and very little transparency. Whereas here we had a little bit more transparency in what things Onshape was considering in terms of added functionality. And if they weren't, they were providing pretty good workarounds as we were going through that process.
Okay, that's good to hear. So let's move on to the whole purpose of this webinar, to talk about Onshape Enterprise. Now, officially, it was only released at the end of May, but you've been using it for a while. We contacted you as a good customer and a good fit for Onshape Enterprise to see if you were interested, and you were, which is great. Have you got what are your first impressions of Enterprise?
Well, Enterprise solved a number of issues for us, right? So there were the generic issues that we had within going from SolidWorks to Onshape, in terms of being able to support multiple sites and revision control, and some of the things that I've already spoken about. What the Enterprise did for us was we had a number of professional licenses, and it allowed us to combine that into a single domain that is branded domain for Capsonic, and that meant that we had a level of administrative control over all of the users who were accessing our data. So now it becomes a corporate data, as opposed to a series of professional licenses and users who have their data that you're trying to manage. I don't want to quite call it like herding cats, but there's a little bit to that in engineers storing data, and you still had access to it, but you weren't sure what they were working on. The enterprise setup gives you an administrative level control over users and access rights, and to specific projects and data. And then also on the back end of it, you can then observe the usage. So you can see what projects are being worked on by document or by project. You can see which operators or users are the most productive and or spending the most time on the CAD. And this gives you a lot of insights into what projects need help. For example, if you observe that a particular engineer is stuck or spending a lot of time working on a particular document or a project, you can kind of track down and see what's going on there, especially if that's over, if we're spending too much time on a specific project. The other side of it is you can see which projects are not getting priority if they need to, because they're not getting worked on, and that visibility for me was huge in terms of being able to track what's going on down with my engineers in Juarez. So I have a team of 3 or 4 engineers down there, a team of 4 engineers up here, and making sure that priorities are being managed and being able to observe that in real time has been very, very helpful. The flip side of that is, sure, you could have engineers do work tickets and provide how much information or how many hours they're working on a specific project. But in the past, I found that to be a little problematic in that, one, it takes away from productivity because they have to take the time to do that. And then secondly, engineers are very, very smart individuals, and they generally kind of write down what is expected of them to some degree, as opposed to really getting a look at the real actual time that's spent on specific projects. And so it doesn't interfere with their work, it doesn't interfere with anything that they're doing, but I get that pure feedback of what's going on. It's not perfect either, but it's certainly better than the alternatives that we've been working with in the past.
Okay.
A couple of the other items that really have helped out with the enterprise version is the 2-factor authentication, which was also important for us. Our networks, last year we had established 2-factor authentication for all of our internal networks, and so it was some concern for us of putting out all of our new product development out on the cloud and making sure we're securing it the same as any of our other business data. And Onshape offers the 2-factor authentication, and that was almost a prerequisite for us in terms of me being able to be sure that we're securing our data.
So, for anybody who's not seen an Onshape Enterprise demo, there are three main themes. One is report and analytics, which Dennis is referring to there, about getting insights into data and usage and so on. Then there is secure control with role-based access and projects and permission schemes. And then there's universal access to get people who need the data, get it to them. How are you sharing data with people who are non-technical or salespeople or customers even?
So we usually do, there's 2 ways to do it. You can do it through share out a link, or you can share out, or you can invite a guest into your domain. And with most of our vendors, we do a process where we actually invite them into our domain. We give them a email account that they log into, generate an Onshape account, and then they're part of our domain, and we can control permissions and share individual documents or components or whatever or even projects with that vendor, and then that gives them an opportunity to review the CAD exactly as we see it, and then they can download that CAD into whatever systems they need for the projects they're working on. We have an example right now where we're doing a motor design, and so we're doing some of the simulations with a contracted third party, and since we're doing the design of the components here, we've shared that data out to them, and they can pull down the updates and they can see it as soon as we are done with it. So they've been doing iterations on the simulations for the motor performance based on the CAD that we provide them. But the best part of it is we don't have to worry about any kind of version control, because as soon as they log in to look at it, they're seeing the same data that we have. There's versioning control within Onshape as well, And so we can always make sure that we're in the same spot and everybody's got the same piece of information.
So when you're working on a project as well, of course, Onshape Enterprise also logs things like data that's been shared with, who has access to what documents,
Yes.
and also how many exports there's been as well. Do you find that
Yes.
information useful?
I do. So, for example, specifically with that vendor, when we started the original contract with them, I was able to make sure that they were onboarded correctly and right away, and then kind of observe and see how are they interacting with the data. You have the activity tracking, so I can see which files they pulled up and looked at, and I can see if they're based on the questions that I get back from them, and then also looking at what they looked at. I can make sure that we're seeing the same thing. It's in the engineering world, really, you know, a lot of times the very first question I ever ask somebody is, what version drawing are you looking at, right? What is the piece of information that you have in front of you that you're referencing when I'm discussing with you? Since everything we do mostly is remote, very rarely are you sitting across the same desk as somebody anymore. And Onshape allows you to do that in the cloud very, very cleanly. So in fact, within the standard Onshape, you know, you can actually both log into the same file and you can then follow somebody else's movements or what they're doing through a solid model or through a drawing. And in almost like a web sharing type activity. And so that keeps you on the same version and always looking at the same thing very, very well. The other really good thing is that it allows us to, this is more of a work in progress for us, but to share it out to a number of other non-technical users. So we've been trying to make sure that, for example, when purchasing is releasing a purchase order, one of their requirements is they have to always send a drawing, right, of the correct revision level that's on the purchase order with the purchase order, as a process of making sure, for example, the vendor's on the same page. And so we're in the process of showing and teaching our purchasing department how to access Onshape so that they can then simply go get the latest level drawing themselves through the release process that we have within Onshape. And since the way that the system is set up, that access is pretty clean. So that's a lot like a PDM system and allowing non-technical users to access the technical data as well. And we intend to roll that out to a lot of the other departments as we go through here, and to really improve a single source of data, right? A single source of truth. That's the biggest hurdle oftentimes in organizations in dealing with technical data.
Right. So I guess you don't have to deal with software compatibility either. I'm guessing obviously your guys in Juarez are using the same version of SolidWorks as you are, but if you're working with suppliers who have got different versions of SolidWorks or indeed any other CAD system, again, it doesn't really make any difference to you.
That's right. So being able to log in on a browser and access the data means that I don't have to worry about license sharing for those non-technical users. I don't have to worry about hardware for them as well, because if they can run a browser reasonably well, they can access the data reasonably well. The biggest hurdle is making sure that you have proper bandwidth. So, as you are setting up the system and now your data is in the cloud, so your critical path becomes your internet connection. And so making sure within your IT department that they have solid backup plans, either, setups for your internet access and good bandwidth will become your most important factor. But that's a centralized function as opposed to dispersed among 20 different computers or desktops or maintaining a lot of different computers. So that becomes an easier critical path to manage.
Right, right. So, you've been using Enterprise for well, 6 months or so. So, how you know overall, what would you say would be the biggest benefit, or the biggest thing that you've seen in using it?
Well, it's interesting. So it's been an evolution for us right up front. Some of the ideas that I discussed earlier about having it on one domain and having management control of the structure and organization of the data, that was by far the most important right up front. The analytics, though, as that came online later and we've started using that, for me as an administrator of the projects and trying to make sure that as a department as whole that we're being efficient with our resources, the analytics has become more important for me in being able to understand who's working on what and when are they working on it and how are we progressing in our projects, and not having to be local to some of the engineers in Juarez all the time. So that's been a huge benefit, and I use that on a daily basis.
Do you have to present the data to any of the executive team, or is it purely for yourself?
Both, right? So for sure, there's the process of reporting out how are we maximizing our resources, how are we being efficient in our design processes, and those metrics, and giving those to my president and helping him understand where do we need to add resources, where are we being inefficient, and so what do we need to focus on versus what's running properly. And this within the CAD environment, right, and within the engineers and the projects that we're working on, this gives a little bit more insight and visibility into that area.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the design process is typically an unknown, like a black box. So requirements go in and drawings come out, and people don't know what goes on in between. So some great information and visibility into exactly what's going on and who's doing what. And and some people say, even for like justifying headcount, like you say, resources, whatever, at least if you've got the data to back up your request, then it makes it clearer for everybody.
Yeah, yes. So if we have a particular project, referring to the slide here where Rigoberto is spending a significant amount of time on that, we can go, okay, I need to maybe transfer over a few resources, or in this particular example also, it looks like maybe Juan was not using the CAD, he was off on the manufacturing floor. So that gives me some of that visibility that I wouldn't otherwise have.
Right. And do you think this can be used as part of a training? I mean, sometimes we find that people who are perhaps struggling a little bit or just learning on the job, that of course they spend more time in one particular document or project than others.
Well, for sure, you see that, and you see that it can give you some visibility into that. I try not to go the big brother route, though. So mostly this is just for my understanding, and I let the engineers, if they're having problems, come to me directly, and then I would be able to know that there probably is an issue there. And like I said, the online training though within Onshape has been really beneficial. That's worked out really well for our remote engineers in terms of them getting and learning the system and then being able to follow the processes that we have.
So what is the future for Capsonic and Onshape? You talked about working with external suppliers and so on. What's your thoughts? Where do you think we'll go from here?
Well, we have a number of areas where I really wanted to push it out to, I think, within our sales staff as they become a little bit more competent with the usage of it, being able to take the designs and assuming they have internet access within their customer facilities when they're there, they'll be able to present the data in real time. It'll make them a lot more competent in terms of the technical details, because they'll be able to present it and show it. That's certainly one area. We also intend to be able to, within the supplier quality engineering, there's certainly training that has to occur there, but letting them have access to the 3D data as opposed to simply a 2D drawing and referring to the vendor that way, they can definitely be more intelligent about cause and effects of changes or changes in processes by being able to understand the data in the three-dimensional world versus the 2D drawing. Those are two of the main areas that I really want to focus on. Like I said, we've done working within the automation department and making sure that they're working within Onshape, and us being able to see what they're working on and then being able to see our designs at the same time has really shown some great benefits. We have other ideas that we floated around about using the Onshape data within the mobile phones in terms of being able to be out on the floor, the manufacturing floor, or tablets, and where we have our assembly equipment, and being able to see the data in 3D right there when you're working with the machinery. That also can be very beneficial. Those are areas where we expect it to evolve.
So, yeah, sounds like a great use case. So, have you got anything else that you like to sum up with, Dennis? Anything last, words of wisdom or anything?
Mostly, the processes and exploration, right? One of the things that we really like about Onshape is that they have been very willing to explore with us, and so that has been something that's been, as we go through this learning process, because dealing with the CAD in the cloud, it's a very different thought process, and they've been helping us learn how to think differently like that. And then at the same time, like I said, being able to beta test the enterprise software and seeing our feedback and input implemented has been very, very gratifying. So
would you ever consider going back to SolidWorks is the big question.
Well, not in the near future for sure, right?
Right.
We're always about the best solution. So, as long as Onshape continues to have the best solution out there, then we would never change.
Well, that's the intention. Okay. All right. Well, if you've got anything else to add, Dennis, we'll switch over to questions. I see that there is not a lot in the way of questions. We have one question here. Ralph is asking, how do you handle integration of mechanical CAD with electrical and wiring design? Now, I know you do a lot of things like connectors and so on. Do you have to get involved with electrical and wiring design?
No, we don't do too much wire routing directly. I know, so I can't speak to like a wiring module within Onshape. I know there's a lot of third-party software out there that maybe can support some of that. That's one of the advantages that we didn't touch on, is the integration of the third-party software and the development of those as it goes along. I know we use like an MCAD software that's tied into Onshape, and so those are things that are all evolving continuously.
Yeah, absolutely. So, anything like electrical or ECAD, as long as we can get the 3D data out of those systems, you can integrate them and work side by side with both mechanical and electrical. Yeah, it's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, it doesn't look like we've got any more questions. I think Dennis, you were very succinct and very you explained the situation perfectly. So, from using, as far as Onshape Enterprise is concerned, the whole reason why we developed it as a product or as a premium offering of the Onshape core product is spelt out in exactly what you've described. So, it's great to have you as a customer. It's great to have you as an Onshape Enterprise customer. And I would like to thank you for your time, Dennis. And but before we go, if so far we've talked about Dennis's experiences with Onshape Enterprise, but we've not actually shown it. If you've not seen a demo of Enterprise, we will be offering a invite-only demo of Onshape Enterprise. I'll be doing it. It's on the 28th of June at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. The URL for that demo is, well, I've done a shortened version there for bit.ly Onshape demo, so bit.ly/Onshape demo, all lowercase. The full URL is below that. When you get the email with recording for this webinar, that URL will be included. So if you wish to have see Enterprise in more detail, then please sign up for that. Okay, and finally, if there are any other questions that come to mind after the fact, then you can email me directly. My email is ncook@onshape.com. So email me, ask the questions, and if it's relating to Dennis, I'll pass it on to Dennis, and I'm sure he'll be more than happy to answer those questions. Okay, and with that, I would like to thank everybody for your time, especially Dennis, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.